Hello and welcome. Today we're going to look at MegaRandom through the ages. And I've heard it said a lot that MegaRandom used to be more random and it's not as random now anymore. So I decided to investigate that a bit. So I did some heavy lifting. I downloaded every version of MegaRandom I could find on AoE Zone and wherever else I could find versions of MegaRandom. I looked through all my backups of the data files for the HD edition and for the definitive edition, looked at all the versions, and then I decided on a couple representative ones that represent basically distinct changes to the MegaRandom script. There are a couple distinct versions, and we're going to look at those in detail and see what we can say about those and how they compare to the present DE MegaRandom. So first up, we have MegaRandom Beta. So MegaRandom was initially released in 2011 by the Prophet, who is now Forgotten Empire's map scripter, or at least was for a long time. I think still is at this point as well. And it had 114 distinct map layouts. These came from previous tournament packs or previous map packs, and also included the official maps and the ensemble studios, like custom maps that they released. And it's important to note, which is why I highlighted that it's not entirely just a glorified map pack. MegaRandom also does some further randomization after a specific map layout is chosen. Here I highlighted this with the elevation and the connections, so a specific map might not always look exactly the same. A specific map layout might not always look exactly the same. And of course the resources can be randomized. At the time it was advertised here that it had 2 to 12 sheep, 0 to 4 boars, 2 to 16 deer, and so on. And then I highlighted a couple other things that are interesting, like at the time a 3 TC start was possible, which I don't think DE does. Same thing with a hunting wolf or an extra monk. I'm pretty sure the modern version of MegaRandom in DE does not include those as potential starting scouts. So overall, this was the beta version. This is the post from AoE Zone that I screenshotted. You can read through the whole thing, but I think that's sort of the general things that it could generate. Next up, we have also in 2011 is the version for WCL7. And there's a big changelog here. In summary, a couple things were made more consistent. Things like walls and nomad starts were made less likely. Nomad starts in general were made more consistent. And there were a couple other changes, like new scouting units such as spearmen, skirmishers, militia, so on. What's important here is this line at the end. More than 38 new map types have been added, and some not so perfect ones have been removed. So the net increase is an increase of 36 maps. So this was a map pack of 150 maps here that MegaRandom had for the WCL7 version. And just sort of as a peek ahead, this is the most that MegaRandom ever had in as possible layouts. If we move on, I have the version that I basically called the MegaRandom HD version. This is the version that was initially released with the Forgotten Empires mod, and remember that mod then became official when it was added as DLC to the HD edition, and that version of MegaRandom was then added to the HD edition at the time, and is more or less unchanged throughout the HD edition time as well. There were some minor bug fixes, but it's basically the same version that was initially with the Forgotten Empires mod was carried all the way through. And that one only had 58 map layouts, so a lot less than we just saw previously. I have a screenshot here. It's kind of small, but you can sort of get a general idea of all the possible layouts that were present at the time in that version. And the next big change came with the definitive edition. So when that released in 2019, the selection of maps was actually still the same. There was one additional map added, that's the one you can see here in the screenshot. The other 58 maps were the same ones as before. However, the code was revamped. You can see here that it has like African baobab trees, the new terrains, and so on. In the HD edition, despite the fact that several DLCs with new terrains, new animals, and so on had been released, MegaRandom was not updated to include those things, as far as I know. However, for the HD edition, for Definitive Edition, that was all added, as well as this one additional map layout. And this version of MegaRandom was used since the release until early 2020, I think. And then we have our next version, which is the present version, basically. That one was developed in 2020, and that was the final big revision to MegaRandom. And that version only has 45 maps, and these map layouts, if you recall the image we saw earlier with the 58 layouts, these 45 are not necessarily the same ones. Some of them are, but overall, a lot of these are new ones or very reworked ones. So it's not fair to say that just 14 maps were removed. You can't just point at those. But this version of MegaRandom only has 45 maps, and that's the MegaRandom that we have today. Of course, it's worth noting again that these 45 map layouts, some of them have distinct variations, where they'll have more lakes or fewer lakes, or if the lakes are frozen or if they're sandy or something, the map can play out very differently than if they're water. So effectively there is more variation than you just see in this image, but still the actual number of layouts is the lowest it's ever been. So, did MegaRandom get less random? Here I've sort of summarized again what the number of layouts was in all the versions where it changed, and all the distinct versions. And based on that, yes, MegaRandom is less, or has less variation than it had in earlier versions. And I guess that begs the question of why. And I don't have the answer there for you. I can imagine a couple reasons. Quite plausible is that it's a lot of work to maintain MegaRandom, because you're not just maintaining one map, you're essentially maintaining 45 maps, or 58, or 150. You have to maintain the entire, all of the maps in there. There could be a bug in a certain map, or a certain one generates unfair, and that's you have to look at all of those. So it could just be easier to manage with fewer maps. It could also be that a lot of the maps that were included in earlier versions were deemed to be not balanced enough for competitive anymore, and that's why they were removed. I could imagine that. It's also quite possible that when MegaRandom went official, became an official part of the game, that they needed to make sure they weren't using maps that they didn't have permission to use. So they either had to create new maps or remove ones that they didn't have the rights to, potentially. I don't know if that's the case, but it's possible that there's something like that behind it as well. In any case, I would say, just in terms of variation, there are fewer variants now, and sort of with a map pack like MegaRandom, it's important that you have as many variants as possible in there, otherwise people will start to recognize them. If you have something like the unknown or hyper-random, where you're just sort of randomizing what type of features there'll be on the map and smashing it all together, then you have lots of variability in there, and you don't need to worry about this. But when you're relying on the approach that MegaRandom is doing, which is having a big map pack and randomizing that, and then randomizing some resources and stuff on top of that, you want to have as many possible distinct maps in there so people don't recognize them. 45 is a bit low. If you play a lot of AoE2, if you play a lot of MegaRandom, you will start to recognize them. So my advice there would be maybe MegaRandom could get some new layouts. could see an increase in the number of map layouts again. That would be nice. And I also have one final treat for those of you that stayed until the end of the video. Namely, I made a map pack of these versions with MegaRandom Beta, WCL7, the HD version, and the 2019 version. It's called MegaRandom Through the Ages. You can get it in the in-game mod manager. And I had to fix up the maps a bit, especially the older ones, because there were a couple bugs that meant that they didn't really work properly out of the box. But I've only made minor changes so that they function and so that they work more or less the way they would have worked at the time. I didn't add Empire Wars or add new terrains or make the resources any more fair than they were at the time. This is basically what MegaRandom Beta was like at the time, what the WCL version was like at the time, what the AOF HD version was like, and what the 2019 version was like. So if you want to try them out, they're available. If you want to use them for some sort of event, sure, go ahead. And if you want to use them for some sort of event and want them fixed up a bit more, you can contact me. Maybe we can do something there. I hope you found this video interesting. If you have any questions, leave them below. And thanks for listening in.